Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our latest coverage from here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. Hello to everyone out there. I'm Will Robinson Smith. I'll be providing our commentary for the duration of this coverage. We're broadcasting from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. Stephen Young is running the technical operations for this broadcast, and our Adam Bernstein is out in the field manning our cameras. Tonight, we're getting ready for not a launch, but instead an important test ahead of a launch of 4 astronauts. You're taking a look at the center of your screen. This is historic Launch Complex 39A. Standing tall, the heart of that is a Falcon 9 rocket from SpaceX, not with a pair of payload fairings, but instead with Crew Dragon Freedom on top. This is the rocket that is preparing to launch the AX-3 mission on behalf of Axiom Space, which will send up 4 astronauts, each representing a different European country. They'll all head up to the International Space Station, the AX-3 mission, which is set to launch as early as this Wednesday at 5:11 p.m. Eastern, 22:11 UTC. We're now about T minus 27 minutes, 47 seconds away from the expected static fire. I'd like to help support our coverage of the space program. Great way to do that is quick and easy if you just hit the like button. If you haven't already, we'd appreciate it if you subscribe to the Spaceflight Now channel here on YouTube and ring the notification bell. That way you're notified when any of our new videos are posted. Of course, you don't miss any of the live streams like this one here. And naturally, we can't do these broadcasts without our wonderful viewers like you watching from home, as well as our channel members. So thanks to everyone who's helping to support Spaceflight Now through channel membership. I'd be remiss if I didn't also thank our wonderful moderators in the live chat, helping to keep the conversation kosher and moving along. I see one of our astute photographers is also helping out, our Michael Kane, popping in the live chat this evening. So be sure to give him a hello. He'll be busy with us tomorrow during the planned launch of the AX-3 mission, along with Adam Bernstein. We're now T minus 25 minutes, 19 seconds and counting. Things are a little bit different from your standard Falcon 9 launch with a batch of, let's say, Starlink satellites, for example. But generally, the fueling process and the timeline for this static fire test, roughly the same timeline, at least as far as some of the major milestones, certainly as far as fueling is concerned for the Falcon 9 rocket. T minus 24 minutes, 50 seconds and counting. We're just a few minutes away from the big vent occurring. It happens as the feed lines are chilled and prior to liquid oxygen being loaded aboard the second stage of the Falcon 9 vehicle. Ahead of the start of the big event, let's go ahead and walk through what the countdown timeline looks like for this mission. And this is a little bit of a preview ahead of what we'll see on launch day itself as far as the main parts of the fueling procedure. The go for the start of propellant load given a little bit earlier on a crew timeline as opposed to a standard payload mission on a Falcon 9 vehicle. That go for the start of prop load is issued at T minus 45 minutes. If that go ahead is given, then the next step is what we have already seen just a little before we came on live with you. It was the retraction of the crew access arm that happened around T minus 42 minutes. And at T minus 39 minutes, the Dragon launch escape system is armed. In the event that something were to go wrong with the Falcon 9 vehicle, it will allow the crew to quickly get away from the rest of the Falcon 9 and off to safety. Same as with normal Falcon 9 missions, though, T minus 35 minutes is when the rocket grade propellant that is that rocket grade kerosene is loaded onto both the first and the second stages of the Falcon 9 vehicle. At the same time, liquid oxygen is also loaded on board just the first stage. Then at T minus 16 minutes, which is our next major fueling milestone to occur, is when LOX-Ode on the second stage will begin. We are watching for the big vent, though, coming in the middle of that, about T minus 20 minutes, around 20 or 30 seconds. So about a minute away is when we're expecting to see that event. That'll let us know that the fueling is happening on schedule. Then at T minus 7 minutes is when the chill down of the 9 Merlin engines occurs. It involves flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and the turbo pumps, protecting them from the risk of thermal shock and damage. At T minus 6 minutes is when the first stage kerosene tank should be full. And at T minus 4 minutes, the Dragon will transition to internal power. T minus 1 minute is when those final pre-launch checks will occur. Control of the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers. The propellant tanks will be pressurized, also around a minute out. T minus 45 seconds is when the launch director will give their go for the static fire. Of course, there's not a launch here. The engine ignition sequence will be issued at T minus 3 seconds. And normally, liftoff would be shortly thereafter. Of course, there's not going to be a command for the hold down clamps to release as the Falcon 9 is not going anywhere. There's no crew on board, but we do see that big vent happening right about on schedule. Good indication that our approximate test time is pretty spot on. We're expecting that static fire coming up at 7:11 Eastern Standard Time, 0011 UTC. In this fueling milestone that we're seeing here, the big vent ahead of LOX load, ahead of this static fire test, an important milestone for SpaceX and Axiom Space before they get ready to have their final overview of everything, assessing if they are in fact ready to launch the third private astronaut mission to the International Space Station, AX-3, on behalf of Axiom Space. The Dragon vehicle that is on top of this Falcon 9 rocket that is set to take this crew up to orbit will also be making its third flight. This is Crew Dragon Freedom. Previously flew the Crew 4 mission for NASA. That was the last crew rotation mission that did not feature a Russian cosmonaut in the commercial crew era. This Dragon also flew the AX-2 mission. So it was previously commanded by former NASA astronaut Peggy Whitson. It will now be commanded by former NASA astronaut Michael Lopez Alegria. T-minus 18 minutes, 3 seconds and counting. Got about a minute and a half left of the big vent before this wraps up. Taking a bit of a wider view, including the countdown clock, you can see both the mission patch as well as the 4-member crew of the AX-3 mission there on the countdown clock here at the press site. It has been a bit of a wild ride from a weather standpoint throughout the day today here in Central Florida. Fortunately, it was not bad enough that it precluded this static fire test from occurring, nor did it stop the dry dress rehearsal, although it may have been a bit soggy at certain points. But the phrase dry dress rehearsal is it signifies that there was no propellant on the vehicle, that it was not fueled in any way. It's a run through of all the other launch day procedures for the crew and the launch team. We're now T-minus 16 minutes, 49 seconds and counting. Getting close to wrapping up the big vent here. T-minus 16 minutes, 18 seconds and counting. The big event has wrapped up. And as it is concluding, I want to thank a few folks for their support this evening. Thanks to Shirley Benoit for the $1 YouTube super chat. Really appreciate that, Shirley. And our thanks to Steve Martin, who I don't believe is the world-renowned actor slash magician, but we're more than happy to have him as a channel member here, who is kind enough to gift 5 Spaceflight Now memberships. Really appreciate that generosity, Steve. Channel membership comes with a number of benefits, including access to 4K views of all the launches that we have here at the Cape, discounts at our online shop, shop.spaceflightnow.com, as well as access to our member-only videos here on YouTube. We're now T-minus 15 minutes, 24 seconds and counting to the approximate static fire time. If you have a question about this mission and would like to help support what we do here at Spaceflight Now, great way to join the conversation is using the YouTube Super Chat feature. If your comment is appropriate to be read in the show, of course, or your question, we'd love to bring you into the chat about the AX-3 mission. Or if you have other questions about future spaceflight operations, we will do our best to answer those questions as well. We're now T minus 14 minutes, 32 seconds and counting. About a minute and a half into fueling of the liquid oxygen on the second stage. We're now T minus 13 minutes, 20 seconds and counting. We know this is a bit of a shorter broadcast than our normal 1 hour out for non-crewed missions, and certainly a bit shorter than when we're actually heading down towards a launch itself. So for those who may be just now joining us, I'm Will Robinson Smith for Spaceflight Now. You're watching a countdown to an important static fire test of SpaceX's Falcon 9 rocket. This is one of the final big steps needed before they are able to go ahead and clear this mission to launch as early as 5:11 p.m. tomorrow, Wednesday, January 17th. Taking a look at space, or you're taking a look at Historic Launch Complex 39A here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. The Falcon 9 rocket is well through the fueling process, just a little over 12 minutes away from static firing those 9 Merlin engines for just a few seconds. It comes at the end of a busy day for Axiom Space and SpaceX as they were going through a launch day simulation with the crew and the whole team known as the dry dress rehearsal, which wrapped up just a little bit ago ahead of this static fire fueling process that you see here. And this is the quartet that's getting ready to launch. They've been in quarantine now for the better part of 2 weeks, heading off to the International Space Station on board that Crew Dragon spacecraft atop the Falcon 9 rocket there for T minus 11 minutes, 30 seconds and counting to the approximate static fire time. Going from left to right here on this picture, you see Mission Specialist Marcus Want. To his left, our right, that is Walter Viade, who is the pilot of the mission. Moving on down the line, that is Michael Lopez Alegria, the commander of the AX-3 mission, who is the only member of the team who has gone to orbit before. Walter has been to suborbital space on board a Virgin Galactic flight last year, but this will be his first time actually heading up to the International Space Station itself. Same with everyone else who's not named Michael in this photo. Commander Lopez Alegria was also a member of the Expedition 14 team, and this will be his second time flying to the station on board a SpaceX Crew Dragon spacecraft. His first time as the commander of the AX-1 mission. He and his colleague at Axiom Space, former NASA astronaut Peggy Whitson, currently share the responsibility of commanding these private astronaut missions to the space station. NASA has also approved Axiom Space to charter the AX-4 mission as the fourth official private astronaut mission heading up to the station. That'll launch later this year. The crew yet to be announced. And last but not least, on the right-hand side of this photo, you see Alper Gezerava representing Turkey. And once he launches, he will become the first Turkish astronaut in space. We're now T minus 9 minutes, 12 seconds and counting. As previously mentioned, they will be flying to the International Space Station on board SpaceX Crew Dragon spacecraft named Freedom, making its third flight up to the station after first flying the Crew 4 mission, a 6-month stay on the orbiting outpost, and also the AX-2 crew. Now T minus 8 minutes, 29 seconds and counting. Less than a minute and a half away from the start of the engine chill-down sequence, where they will thermally condition the 9 Merlin engines ahead of the static fire test coming up. Just as a reminder to those who are maybe just now joining us, this is not going to be a launch, so you're not going to see the hold down clamp command for release. The rocket will stay firmly in place. This is a static fire test of the 9 Merlin engines. After this is done, they will take the data into the launch readiness review, which is set for tomorrow morning, where teams from NASA, Axiom Space, and SpaceX will all sit down. They'll review all the data from the static fire test, as well as go through an assessment of the dry dress rehearsal that wrapped up earlier today, and verify that everything is ready for the launch of this mission, as well as for the International Space Station to receive this 4-member crew. Now T minus 6 minutes, 49 seconds and counting. That chill down sequence has now begun. Coming up in less than a minute and a half. The point in the timeline when the Dragon will transition to internal power. Before I go ahead and bring this next slide up, just want to reiterate once again, this is not a launch, this is a static fire test, but just to give you a little bit of a preview into the operations that will happen tomorrow. This is an overview of what the flight will look like. This will be, as has been the case with all the crew missions from here at the Cape, a return to landing site operation where the first stage booster will make a landing back at landing zone 1 over at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. That's as opposed to it landing on one of SpaceX's drone ships. So as a heads up, again, for tomorrow, If you have any friends or family that are in the Central Florida area, or if you yourself are going to be in town to try and catch the launch, just be aware there will likely be a static boom as the first stage vehicle comes back through the atmosphere to make its landing over at LZ1. Again, not a launch today, just a little bit of a preview for tomorrow. We're now T minus 4 minutes, 29 seconds and counting. We're now T minus 3 minutes, 40 seconds and counting. Appreciate the 3,300 of you that are joining us this evening for this all-important static fire test. If you haven't already, we'd certainly appreciate it if you could do us a favor and hit the like button, share the stream. Helps the YouTube algorithm do its thing and bring this live coverage to more people as we get close to seeing those 9 Merlin engines come to life for just a few seconds for an all-important static fire test. Called as such because the rocket is not going anywhere. It is remaining, in fact, static. We're now T minus 3 minutes and counting. Taking a closer look in. Appreciate the punched in view, either Adam or Steven, whoever made the adjustment there. A closer view of the upper part of the rocket. You're seeing upper part of the first stage, the inner stage, the second stage of the vehicle, and of course, the all-important Crew Dragon at the top. A little bit masked by the crew access arm there. We're coming up on the point in which fueling should be wrapping up in the next about 40 seconds or so. Do want to thank one of our channel members, Fight Shrub, for checking in with us and for gifting a Spaceflight Now membership. So if you're the lucky recipient, which I believe went to Tammy Singh, if you haven't already, be sure to thank Fight Shrub in the live chat here. And you'll now have access to 4K views of the launch tomorrow. Same with all of our channel members. We're now T minus 1 minute, 30 seconds and counting. We're at the point where I have those ground gas closeouts, and we're trending well on our way to a static fire test coming up in just a little over a minute now. And yes, just as to echo what our photographer Michael Kane is saying in the live chat, no, the crew are not on board. They already went through their test today in the dry dress rehearsal. So this is an uncrewed static fire test coming up T minus 51 seconds. $30. 20 seconds. Again, this is an approximate time, so if we're off just by a couple seconds, bear with us. But generally 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. And we've got a static fire underway. And engine shut down. We're now about T plus 30 seconds following the start of the static fire test. And by all indications, it appears it was a good static fire. To answer some of the questions and comments in the live chat, no, it didn't fail. The static fire test is only about 6 or 8 seconds or so. It's just a short duration burn to ensure that everything is functioning properly on the Falcon 9 vehicle. Similarly, with the Falcon Heavy rockets, not all the Falcon 9s go through a static fire test at the pad, but it is an important precursor and a test for key missions like crewed missions to the International Space Station that SpaceX and its partners, usually NASA, but now for the third time, Axiom Space, conduct to make sure that everything is running in order before they put the most important things that they could on the top of the rocket, and that is human beings. Four-member crew will be heading up to the International Space Station as early as tomorrow afternoon is when their launch will take place. With that, we're going to go ahead and start to wind down our live coverage for this evening. Some of the watch items to let everyone know to keep an eye out for following the draining and safing of this vehicle. NASA, SpaceX, and Axiom Space will be hosting a teleconference with the press to talk about the results of the static fire, as well as look ahead to the launch readiness review taking place tomorrow. So we are waiting for SpaceX to issue their comments ahead of the press briefing, which may or may not come ahead of this press briefing. It may just be all sort of part and parcel. Be sure to follow along if you're not already with Spaceflight Now on X, formerly known as Twitter, where we'll be posting live updates on the press conference coming up later on this evening. The timeline is a little bit truncated as they were intending to do the dry dress rehearsal and the static fire test yesterday. And the teleconference was intended to happen after the launch readiness review. Things have flipped a little bit, so The press conference is actually going to be tonight. Launch readiness review is going to be tomorrow morning. And so the plan as it currently stands now is for the launch of the AX-3 mission to take place tomorrow at 5:11 p.m. Eastern, 22:11 UTC. We'll wait and see if there's any updates to that launch timeline and if for whatever reason they need to pivot to a 24-hour backup on Thursday. Regardless of when they launch, you can count on Spaceflight now for live launch coverage. Be sure to look to our social media, both here on YouTube as well as on X, for the start times of everything. But it'll be well in advance of fueling, as we want to bring you all of the sights and sounds of the crew getting ready for their all-important mission, getting out to the pad, getting into the Dragon capsule, and we'll be with you every step of the way, including a live guest we'll have on board to talk about some of the science that they'll be conducting on their 14-day stay aboard the orbiting outpost. So look forward to that conversation. I'll just let that tease hang for now, and you'll see who we've got coming on to the broadcast tomorrow, or whenever we do start our live launch coverage if the launch itself happens to pivot to Thursday. So with that, we're going to go ahead and say good evening for now. Really appreciate everyone for sticking with us for this static fire test. I want to thank the team that helped make this possible tonight. Our thanks to all of the wonderful moderators in the live chat, and for one of our ace photographers, Michael Kane, for popping in and helping out this evening. Our thanks to Adam Bernstein, out in the field manning the tracking cameras, and sounds like may have gotten some good photography of the static fire test as well. Yep, just taking a look at that now. We'll have that up on our social channels as well in just a little bit. Our thanks to Stephen Young for running the technical aspects of the broadcast. And most importantly, thanks to you for being with us this evening. Always appreciate your support and your viewership. We don't take it for granted. And we look forward to seeing you again on launch day. For all of us here at Spaceflight Now, I'm Will Robinson Smith. Be good to yourself, be good to others, and we will see you next time.